Hello and welcome. I'm Marcus, and this is Marcus Rambles. It's that time once again, where the night descends upon us just a little too fast, and the shadows around the corners of your eyes become more lively than usual. Halloween is a special time for me, and since I'm much too old to go out and get free candy from strangers, which is total bullshit, Mom! I have to find other ways of entertaining myself during the month of All Hallows Eve. This usually comes in three forms: video games, movies, and getting shit-faced while playing video games or watching movies. I've been talking about movies a lot on this channel as of late, so I felt, hey, why not a video game for a change? Spice is the spice of life after all. Wait. A very basic and natural human fear to have is the fear of losing control. Everyone has this need or desire to have everything laid out, to have all their ducks in a row. And having that control taken away from us can be a scary thing at times. Whether it be someone telling you not to leave your house for some reason, or a force making you do something you can't help but do, the loss of control is a powerful thing. And no other horror subgenre shows the loss of control better than the demonic possession. There's something inherently terrifying about having your own body hijacked by a malevolent force whose sole purpose is to cause terror and misery, either to your own being or to those around you. Sometimes both. And while nearly every form of media has covered the subject, video games about demonic possession are kind of a rarity. At least in my experience they are. I can't really think of any video games where demonic possession is the major focus. So, when something like Faith showed up on my radar, I was intrigued. But I'll be honest, it wasn't the idea of playing a game about a priest trying to banish evil out of a young girl that garnered my attention, but rather the style and approach the game takes in portraying that idea. If it's not evident by the title screen, Faith is an indie game made in the style of classic retro Atari and ZX Spectrum games of yesteryear. Created by Airdorf Games, Faith aims to try and create a genuine horror experience, all while maintaining a classic 8-bit art and gameplay style. And I'll be upfront about this, I think they succeeded.
September 21st, 1987. It's been 1 year since I first went inside that house. I have to finish what I started. What I am about to do has not been approved by the Vatican.
I think it's they. It's most likely one dude who does this as a hobby. Couldn't actually find out all that much about the developer. Strange. This game came out in 2017, and I think that's kind of impressive in of itself. It has such a great look to it. It's charming to see someone make something like this in today's era. It takes skill to make really good looking pixel art, but it takes some balls to make an Atari game for today's
4K ultra widescreen NVIDIA graphics card
audience. There are some moments that I'm pretty sure wouldn't be possible to pull off on a machine like the Atari or ColecoVision, but that doesn't bother me. It's one thing to make a game with the limitations of an outdated gaming console. It's another thing to completely ignore the capabilities of today's technology, all for the sake of authenticity. Not that there's nothing wrong with that, but at that point you've entered the territory of fanatic. It's like choosing to go into a gunfight armed with a musket and your opponent is using state-of-the-art technology to fire a weapon that looks like a musket but fires like a modern gun. Using limitations is arguably Faith's greatest strength. For a horror game, yes, this is a horror game, that looks like this, your first impression is most likely, come on, it can't be that scary. Well, imaginary person with no characteristics, you would be wrong. Faith is pretty unnerving at points, but alas, I'm getting ahead of myself. What do you do in Faith? Let's just say for now that you play as a priest who failed years ago to save a young girl from a demonic possession and are now returning to finish the job. As mentioned before, the game is going for a retro style, but even then, I think the game looks really good, even looking at it as a retro game. I can't even really complain about the main character looking like a strange one-eyed squid man, because that's what people kind of looked like in video games back in the day, if the character was even a person. I mean, look at Pitfall Harry. Dude looks like a monster. There is a dash of modern game design, though, as the game has a few cutscenes. They're really well done, and in my opinion, heckin' spoopy. The music is really nice, too. It's atmospheric, chilling, and most importantly, it doesn't grate on my nerves. The audio itself is another strength that Faith knows how to use. There's this tendency in horror games and movies to fill moments of dread and fear with unnecessary music in an attempt to make you feel scared, rather than letting the scenario or scene itself scare you. And while this music does play throughout a good chunk of the game, it's the quiet moments that really got to me. There comes a moment when you find a shed in the middle of the woods, and upon entering, you're bashed in the skull with striking silence. Striking Silence sounds like a cool name for a ninja game. Faith has a lot of moments like this where the silence becomes deafening, and it's these moments when the horror of this horror game really shines. And that's not even mentioning some of the horrible noises that the monster makes. Oh yeah, there's a monster. We'll talk about that in a second. For a majority of the game, you're going to be wandering about in this large, spooky forest until you come across arguably one of the scariest screens I've seen in an 8-bit game. The game uses color rather conservatively, so when I see this house, this neon blood red death house, I admit, it scared me. It's off-putting. It looks like one of them cursed images the young people like to talk about on the interwebs. But to me, the scariest thing happens when you go to enter the house.
It's locked.
There's something really unsettling about the way the main character says that line. Maybe it's the delivery or the cadence. Maybe it's the fact that the music cuts out. Maybe it's because it's not really a person talking, but rather a synthesized voice. I don't know, but it got to me. From here, you search through the forest, and thankfully there are other things to encounter along your journey to find the key to this house. There's a whole slew of collectible notes that fill in more about the story going on here. Oh, and also, this thing is following you the whole time. That is genuinely off-putting. Mostly because of the horrible noises that spews forth from its mouth hole. Faith uses synthesized voices frequently, something that really wasn't seen all that much back in the day. I think the ColecoVision had an attachment for some games to simulate voices, and this thing speaks to you, and it's deeply horrific. But worry not. You can defend yourself against the horrors of the night, because unbeknownst to this thing, you've got Jesus on your side! Yes, at any given moment, you can bring forth your mighty crucifix to drive the beast away. You also use your crucifix to bless certain objects found within the forest. This isn't necessary to beat the game. All this does is give you something that adds more to the game's story. And if you find all the notes, you can get a secret note upon getting the best ending. Oh yeah, Faith has multiple endings, we'll get there. Given that there are literally only 2 options in this game in terms of controls, move and... you'd think this game would be easy. I disagree. I died quite a few times playing this. The monster, whom I will refer to as the Pigman because of this line, shows up at random intervals. He's gone just long enough to lull you into a state of false security, but shows up enough times to keep you on your toes. But sometimes he can come at you from an angle that's too close to the main character and just... yeah. Once you find the key to the house, you can finally enter this ominous-looking abode, and nope, nuh-uh. This is too spooky for me. Let's talk about the forest for a second. No, not that forest. While playing this game, I started to recognize that certain areas were being consistent in their location, leading me to believe that they were at a fixed point. And thus, I started drawing a map, because I'm weird like that. However, I came to a realization. Mapping the forest is not possible, because there are times when I could go to one part of the forest following my map, only to end up on a previous screen that logically couldn't be possible. On one hand, this could be seen as a limitation or a bug perhaps. On the other hand though, a part of me thinks it's intentional. This could be an attempt at making the forest disorienting. The forest is consistent enough so that you don't get super lost, but it also throws you through loops that make you question, wait, how did I end up here? Like the forest is playing tricks on your mind. I don't know if it's necessarily successful at this, or even intentional, but there's something there. I'm not sure what, but it's there. Okay, back to the house. This is the most frightening part of the game, the house itself. The silence grabs you and doesn't let go, making the sounds that do show up all the more startling. Exploring the house is intense. The game has taught you up till this point that danger can come at a moment's notice, so being inside a cramped space with limited room to move only adds to that sense of danger. That's truly the impressive thing to me. Faith is 8-bit and actually made me feel tense and scared. Maybe it's because I'm a massive pussy, but still, there's something here. Some sort of spark of horror creativity that I can wholeheartedly say scared me. And there are a few small visual things that really got to me too. My favorite being the leaky shower head. I don't know why this gets to me, but it does. It adds a touch of realism and motion to an otherwise static environment. Also, nothing is worse than leaky plumbing, let me tell you what. Eventually you come face to face with a demon and God damn it! Nothing good lasts. Okay, that's a bit harsh. Faith actually has a final boss fight, which is weird to say for a game like this, but here we are. The first stage is easy enough, not particularly difficult, but if you're not careful, you'll end up a pile of priest on the floor. The second stage is far more challenging, and it's here where the problems really start to rear their heads. It seems channeling the power of the Lord removes the functionality from the rest of your body, as you can't move and at the same time. That's not a huge problem, but this only shows the true flaw of the game, and that's that the good father is slow as molasses. I died a lot on the second stage of the boss, mostly due to my own stupidity, as I didn't realize you couldn't stop the demon from flying at you, and that you're supposed to avoid her. But look at this! I move at just the right speed. Each time she comes flying at me, she barely misses me. At first, this was kind of exhilarating, but then the third stage of the boss happens. Fuck me sideways! This image of a demon hand blasting through this girl's face hole is seared into my memory, because thankfully whenever you die fighting the boss, you get to start right at the beginning of the stage you died on. But it also plays the animation again, and you can't skip it. I say thankfully because if I had to fight the boss all over from the very start, well, let's just say my corpse would be hanging from a tree. Just in time for the Halloween lawn decoration contest. Can you say first place? Booyah! The demon is so fast, and you are so slow. If the main character moved just a little faster, this wouldn't be as bad. It's not just that she moves fast though, she's sporadic too. It's like a game of Pong from hell. On top of that, she has this spiraling death sigil that, should it touch you, she'll make a beeline for you, at which point you may as well just accept the sweet embrace of death. And what's worse, I can't tell you how close you have to be in order to damage her. I don't know how I beat her. I did. I couldn't tell you what you have to do in order to survive. My best advice if you choose to play this? Stay away from her at this point. Take your time. Don't rush in. Because if she moves in your direction, you have a 10% chance of not getting hit. The fight is surprisingly long too, and that's not including the amount of times I died. Speaking of length, check out my dick! Nah, I'm kidding. Buy me dinner first. To me, this game is probably the perfect thing to play on or around Halloween because A, it's only like an hour and a half long depending on how well you play, and B, it's free, sort of. When I got a copy, I got it for free, but looking at the developer's website, it mentions it's pay what you want. So, yeah, it's technically free, or if you're feeling generous, you can give the dev a few bucks. The length of the game is just right for something like this. It doesn't have a huge, sprawling story with hours of dialogue, but it also doesn't have a ton of replayability either. It's a nice, small, sweet surprise you can enjoy in one sitting late at night, like a Halloween candy. But good Halloween candy, like mini Snickers or mini Wunderbars. I'm not opposed to games with multiple endings. I play a lot of RPGs where this sort of storytelling is very prominent. What I am opposed to is multiple endings that change the entire story. Faith has a whopping 5 endings, which is already kind of insane, but some of them change the entire story. I'm gonna spoil the ending, so best to back out now if you want to play the game for yourself. There's a link in the description to the game's website if you're curious and want to try it out for yourself. Spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! The first ending I got is ultimately one of the worst. After defeating the demon
In spiritual combat,
you find a gun on the first floor of the house,
A gun with 1 bullet.
and the words, "Kill her," written on the floor. So I shot the bitch. After that, the police pull you over, and it turns out you killed a girl who had been missing for a few days, and that your character wasn't even a priest. He was just a crazy guy. Lame. Endings that involve the phrase, "it was all in his head the whole time," can be done well, but nowadays it's a pretty lazy trope. And in my personal experience, it kind of takes the fun out of the whole thing. Thankfully, the game starts you right back off at the point where you can pick up the gun, because fuck the boss fight. The second ending I got has you going back to the car with the gun and then absolutely blasting Pigman in the face. In the face! And then, just to twist the knife, it gets steamrolled by a semi-truck. The ending here is a police report claiming that the truck hit some strange animal that people are calling a chupacabra. This is okay. It's kind of an outsider's perspective on the events that transpired the night the exorcism took place. A rational man's explanation to what the truck hit without seeing the fuller picture. I don't mind this ending. I don't love it, but I also don't hate it. After that, I'm gonna be honest, I looked up how to get the other endings because at this point, I couldn't think of anything that would trigger 3 other endings. Turns out, you can go back to the shed where you found the key to the house and there's a Shadow Man waiting for you? No, not that Shadow Man! Although, to be honest, I'm not sure what Shadow Man this is supposed to be. There is one part of the game where if you look in the mirror in the house, you'll see an amorphous shadow following your character. Something that really spooked me, if I'm being honest. But I just thought it was a little scare, nothing more. So yeah, I don't know what this thing is, but you know what they say.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
This leads to an ending that I actually like. It plays out the same as the ending where you shoot Man-Pig, only this time instead of shooting Man-Pig with the shotgun, Man-Pig is riding shotgun.
I shall not be afraid.
I really like this ending. It reminds me of the first Friday the 13th, or the ending of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Still not my favorite ending. The next ending I witnessed is straight up a joke ending. I'm not kidding. It's a joke ending. Are you ready for this one? Throughout the game, you'll sometimes encounter deer just out in the forest. If you shoot one of the deer and go back to your car, a deer will head-on collide with your vehicle, and then a herd of them will show up, watch you struggle to live, and then one of them runs over and tramples you to death. Now here's the really funny thing. Did you know that deer kill a lot of drivers? Apparently every year, roughly 200 people are killed in head-on collisions with deer. To give you an idea, in 2017, ISAF recorded a total of 155 supposed shark attacks and found only 88 of them were unprovoked attacks on humans. But get this. Of those 88 attacks, only 5 of them were fatal. And we're talking about sharks, the apex predator of the ocean. The shark, ladies and gentlemen, otherwise known as the deer's bitch. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything about deer ritualistically murdering humans for revenge, but who knows? Nature works in mysterious ways. This could be happening right now, and we wouldn't even know it. And thus, we come to the final ending I got, and ultimately, my favorite ending. How you get this ending is kind of stupid. Like, really stupid. Earlier on in the game, you can come across this bloody carcass in the middle of a circle of rocks, and a disembodied voice says, well, that's not ominous. If you come back here with the gun, you can shoot the carcass for some reason. Like, why would you? What rational reason would you have for shooting something that's already dead? But regardless, I can't deny that this is my favorite ending. You return to the car, and as you drive away into the night... oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, baby. It's cult time. Yes, you get jumped by a cult. That's awesome. Just because I find cults fascinating, but also because it paints a wider picture of what was possibly going on here. There's even a few messages that you can find throughout the game that support the theory that a cult of some kind was involved in the demonic possession at play. For me, this is the definitive ending. I typically like my endings to be happy, but when it comes to horror stories, especially ones with cults involved, I'm okay with an ending that's not exactly hopeful. Before I end things, I want to talk briefly about the story of Faith. It's meh. To me, this is one of those games that you really don't need to know too much about the story to enjoy the game itself. It's vague, but I think it's vague for a reason. It's supposed to emulate an Atari game, so it doesn't bog itself down with a ton of story details. But if you're looking for a story you can piece together, it's there. I just didn't find it to be all that particularly interesting. It kind of reminds me of the storytelling the Five Nights at Freddy's games use. There's something there, but honestly it's not that important. You can play this game with just the beginning narration and not read any of the notes you find and you'll be fine. In the end, I found Faith to be pretty enjoyable. It's not stellar or amazing, it does some things really well and some not so much, but overall I found the game to be quite endearing. And surprisingly, a sequel is in the works, Faith Chapter 2. I'm probably going to play that, not for the story, because the story of Faith is the weakest part, but the gameplay itself and the atmosphere were enough for me. So I'm hoping the second game keeps that up. I just hope it doesn't end up like Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Faith's a great Halloween treat to play in the dark. Maybe not repeatedly, but like once a year bust it out and have some fun. I want to thank you all for listening to me ramble in the dark like a madman. I'm Marcus, and I hope you'll join me again. And before you leave, I want you all to have a safe and happy Halloween. See you next time.